Hello and welcome to another digital marketing podcast by Exposure Ninja. This week we're going to be talking about how to create an unbeatable SEO strategy for 2025. And before I get on to the first question, I'll do some introductions. And before I get there, first I want to do a bit of a recap on where Google's position is right now. So you may have seen via our previous podcasts and some of the videos we put out on our YouTube channel, over on YouTube, Google has lost some traffic year on year. So it's been down by a couple of percentage, down to about 89% of total coverage of all Google search, all searches are going to Google. That's dropped year on year, which is not good for them, but still presents a huge opportunity when it comes to SEO. And the reason I say that is that over the course of 2024, there are about 3.1 trillion searches that happened based on 8.3 billion searches happening every day. Like every minute, there are millions and millions and millions of searches that are happening. And you can still grab those and pull people through to your website. But we'll get on to that in just a second. It's very much still going to be part of your marketing mix. It's still going to be a necessity to get people through to your website via people searching the top of the funnel, searching for things, searching for products for your services. You need it as part of your mix because you want to offset that PPC spend. You want to maximize your marketing channels potential as well. There's no real full funnel without it. To get maximum revenue potential, you need to make sure you're doing some SEO. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And I'm joined by Charlie Marchant, who's the CEO of Exposure Ninja, as well as Andy Tuxford, who's the head of SEO. And Andy, I imagine a lot of people are going to be asking, is SEO still important in 2025?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you kind of touched on all the points there in terms of it's still part of the fun. It's still part of the funnel. You can't get away from it. It's still absolutely huge. Google search, and well, not just Google, because SEO also applies to Bing and other search platforms. So it's still an absolutely massive part of the digital landscape. Like you were saying, it is down a bit year on year. It is losing some I suppose market share, you'd call it, as the AI platforms are sort of eating into that. But I don't see it as they're losing opportunity. So they're more where they're more losing, where these AI platforms are eating into their market share is around the informational, the researching type searches. That seems to be what they're taking, whereas the for want of a better term, money searchers are still within Google. The searches that are going to be driving money to your business, they're still being conducted in Google. So that's still where you need to be to get that business.
Off the top of your head, can you think of any money terms that you see as still kind of protected, maybe potentially for our clients, that you haven't seen any impact from these other methods of search like ChatGPT?
It's hard to pull out specific ones because most of the search, it's difficult to see exactly what people are searching for on these tools because the tools don't just don't exist to get that information yet. I'm sure they will come in the fullness of time, but there's no tool out there where you can see search volume for certain things on ChatGPT. They just don't tell you. But where these what we're seeing generally and we can extrapolate this from where Google's going with their AI overviews, is they're much more common on informational type searches where people are looking for information rather than a service to purchase. We also got, I believe Tim did a video on it not too long ago on the Ofcom report of AI usage, and the numbers in there were staggeringly high. Of lots of people are still using AI search, but a huge amount of them don't trust the information they're getting from AIs. So they're doing a bit of research, they're finding out a bit more about a subject that they maybe don't know a lot about, and then they're taking that and they're going to other platforms like Google to search a bit more on. Now they're a bit more informed for the more targeted thing they're looking for, a bit more specific, which is where the money searches come from.
It's interesting you say that because a lot of the new kind of releases of these AI tools, like there's a recent addition called DeepSeek out of China, has web search as a key feature within it. Like people have been crying out for that element within ChatGPT and other places. Like the reason that Perplexity has done so well is because it does pull from the web. And it's like I say, it just backs up. Like people need that element of trust of like going out there and double checking the information. So they're always going to come back to Google. But there's also like a habit to be broken there as well.
Yeah, I see it a bit like AI AI is almost like somebody telling you about something, whereas Google gets you directly to the source, the website. So it gets you directly to the source. It's almost a bit like, if you're checking out new restaurants, you might ask your friend for tips on it, and they might tell you a bit about it. That's similar to the AI. They might tell you, oh, I went here, this was great, and so on. But it's still going to be more valuable to you in deciding if you like that restaurant, to actually go and have a look at the restaurant, check out their menu, have a look in the kitchen. It's still you're going to be that bit surer about going there. And I think that's what Google still provides. It gives you, obviously there's various sites and they've all got various levels of information and depth of information on them, but it's at least closer to the direct source of the information. Those sites might be regurgitating information from somewhere else, but you've got that direct source, whereas AI is something, it's compiled it all for you and giving you an overview, which is useful, but it's not a direct source.
I wonder how you see businesses prioritizing SEO. Do you think that they're still going to be doing so? Do you think it would be wise for them to do so? I mean, I imagine given our position, we're going to say yes.
Yes, I believe they absolutely should be. So it's still, like you said, it's still however many trillions of searches it was conducted. It's still absolutely massive. Even if it's lost a bit of market share, it's still 89% of 9 in 10 searches are happening in Google. You'd be a fool to cut out 90% of your potential market. And that's where Google represents 90% of your market. If you're online and trying to sell through a website, 90% of your market's on Google. So
yeah, last week I had the pleasure of speaking to a roundtable of about 10 CEOs of pretty big businesses based in London. And when I was speaking to them about their marketing, they were very much still thinking about SEO and Google ads as well, and what that means for their business, just because such a massive percentage, like Andy says, of their current traffic and therefore leads and revenue comes from Google. Like quite rightly, those CEOs aren't, suddenly throwing all of their budget into AI when actually SEO on Google is still the main thing that's driving them that income. Like, I think, are they aware of AI? Absolutely. But is that where all the marketing budget's going in those businesses? Definitely not.
If you were to think about allocating budget for all these channels this year, Charlie, how would you go about it? How much would you be investing in each of these channels? Would you be going like really heavy with PPC just to keep yourself safe? No matter where people are going, you're going to capture them with an ad? Or
I think it depends so much on the business and the industry. If I would do it based on where you currently know that your biggest share of customers are coming from, and do it the same way. I think I always talk about the 80-20, like 80% of your budget on stuff you know is definitely going to work and going hard on it. And I think for a lot of businesses, that is going to be organic SEO and Google ads. And I know that a lot of people have it in their mind that they hope that they may be able to pull out budget from Google ads the better performing their SEO is, which I think is a very realistic hope if you're not in a super competitive field, but maybe a little bit more unrealistic if you've got very, very fierce competitors where you're always going to have to be bidding on key terms. And 20% experimental, 20% of things that you think might work. And I always think, like, have a little bit of fun with your marketing and your marketing budget as well. So like that could be very different, I think, for lots of businesses. I think anyone who relies heavily on search, they are probably going to be thinking about experimenting on the AI, the generative engine optimization side with that 20%. But I also think there's a lot to be said for, what you do with video that really supports SEO, or what you might do with podcast, and how you try and get into search results on slightly more creative channels that actually maybe are a little bit more untapped into in some sectors.
I wonder if that's a good segue, Andy, for us to talk a little bit more about what has changed for SEO in 2025 beyond, the arrival of all these chatbots and everything else. What else has changed?
Well, SEO is still very similar to it has been, and we see a good way to track it is if you follow the Google notes that they release about algorithm updates. So when they do broad core algorithm updates, they'll release it's quite brief. It doesn't go into too much detail because they don't want to give the secret source away, but they do give some guidance on what they've changed and what to focus on. And we've seen for the last couple of years, it's been very, very similar. It's been focus on value adding content. Don't write for bots, Create your website for users. Make something that is valuable and useful for users. Don't just try and target bots or obsessively target specific keywords. Create something that adds value to your users. So it's still going in that way. Where I see it changing more over the year is I expect AI to become more integrated with Google's algorithm. As you said, we've started getting AI platforms now that are including search. So they're adding search features as well. It's what users want, and I can only see Google responding to this in terms of adding more AI into their algorithm and how it works. They already do to a degree, but I can see that coming more so. And in that kind of influenced by that as well, brand management and PR I see becoming more important. Making sure you're not just promoting your core website offering, you're promoting your brand as a whole as well, and why your brand is a good brand and why users should like your brand and should be focusing on your brand. The final point that I could see becoming more prevalent in 2025 is, we sort of touched on it, is multi-channel marketing. Make sure you're not just putting all your eggs in one basket. You're using multiple channels. It's becoming, from what we're seeing in results, far more effective to have multiple channels all working together rather than just focusing everything on one. That's not to say you can't get value from focusing on one, depending on what your exact needs are and budget constraints and so on. But multi-channel, especially as you get larger budgets, does work really effectively.
It's interesting you should say about the multi-channel part. I believe that is quite important, especially when you're putting an omni-channel mix together, like you're trying to cover all the bases and trying to pull in the data from who knows there and wherever. We'll come on to that a little bit later. But somebody is asking in the chat, and feel free to leave a question if you are watching us live, about SEO or how to build an SEO strategy. Somebody's asking about which other platforms to kind of focus on in this multi-channel approach, and perhaps not the ad side. I should be using Google Ads, I should be this, but should they be using LinkedIn, Media, and Quora, and all these other places to impact the SEO results you're trying to drive?
Yeah, absolutely. They should be.
Cool.
Which ones exactly is it's going to vary massively by business, which ones they're going to get the most mileage out of. But you've got to think, where's your market? Where are your customers? Where are they hanging out? Are they on Facebook? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they in Quora? What are they doing when they're not on your website? When they're not actively searching for your offering, where are they? What are they doing? What are they interested in? And you need to work that out and then utilize those other platforms. So, for a pretty simple example, LinkedIn tends to be very professional and business focused. So, are you targeting other professionals? Chances are they're going to be hanging out on LinkedIn. So you need to maybe consider looking at LinkedIn. Are you more fun, creative style marketing? They might be on Facebook or Instagram or one of these other platforms. So you need to work out where your customers are when they're not actively engaging with your business.
And what I imagine there's different channels, there's different platforms that are going to pull in traffic, and they're going to put your brand in front of more people, which is certainly something for AI. Is there like a direct SEO correlation between like what we would typically think of as off-page SEO? Is it the same as it always has been? Has it changed?
It's hard to say if there has been much change in it. It definitely influences it. I mean, you've got through your traditional SEO methods. If you all know these other channels, you've got links and so on, all passing, the traditional link juice. But as AI becomes more prevalent in Google's algorithm, it's using these things as signals. Seeing people interacting with you and your brand on these other platforms, and they're liking it, they're enjoying it, they're having a good interaction with you, and that's a vote in your favor. It's Google's been focused for a few years now on everybody's probably heard the E-A-T, so your expertise, trustworthiness, etc. It helps build those. They can see you're engaging with your customers on other platforms and they're having a good experience. Well, that's another feather in your cap as why people should trust your business, as why you've got authority on your subject, because it's not just through this content, it's through these other avenues as well.
Just to keep us on the subject of how SEO will change in 2025, have there been any significant algorithm updates that will impact how we do SEO in 2025 as well?
So there was actually 2 algorithm updates in December. I'm not sure how significant they were though, because it seemed to be, at least from all the data that we have access to, it seemed to not really impact anybody much. We saw a little bit of fluctuation at the time, but then it kind of balanced out. So I'm not entirely sure what Google changed there. They gave their usual update of focus on value-adding content, etc. But we didn't really see much change in any of the business and wider in the business. It didn't seem there was much fluctuation there. So in the business, in the industry, didn't see much fluctuation there. So I'm not sure exactly what they changed there. It seemed to be possibly a bit of a tweak behind the scenes and didn't really adjust too much. They also had a spam update, and they do them periodically, so to deal with sites building spammy links. So that's something definitely to stay away from in 2025. Hopefully you should have been staying away from those kind of things before this year, but definitely something to stay away from this year. Towards the end of last year, we did have a few updates going a bit further back into last year, and they tended to be overall, in general, a bit more focused, a bit more AI focused on, like I said, the quality of the information, not necessarily specific, like backlinks has been a real factor or anything like that. It tends to be more focused about the quality of information. Sites with particularly lead gen type sites with a bit more depth of information in their content were the ones that tended to win in those situations. So they seem to be leaning that way, and it matches up with the guidance they're giving. Make sure you're creating content that adds value, not just targets this keyword. What is useful for your customers? Answer that.
Charlie, I'm just wondering, from a marketing leader's point of view, if I was a VP or director and I'm thinking about SEO as a priority, and I'm wary of updates that come along and they cause mass disruption, or there's potential that Google traffic may decline. What would you say to those leaders about SEO and their concerns?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing I would say is, thankfully last year Google decided not to ruin Christmas by making anything too bad. But I would say don't rest on your laurels about that. I'm not sure that they care too much about Christmas in future. I would say that if you're actually taking care of your website and you're not doing anything shady, you're putting out really good quality content, you're linking that, you're doing a nice outreach campaign, you're doing PR that supports what your business is doing, and you've got everything, well structured on your site. You're not building spammy links, you're not spinning loads of content, all of the things that have really been true for a long time, but I think are particularly true with the potential of using AI in content more and more, then I think you have less to be worried about. I think it's something though that any marketing head, VP, is going to be keeping their eye on all of the time, and absolutely should be, to see what happens in Google Analytics, because then if something did happen, you can monitor it, you can make decisions about what you're going to do, what you're going to change, how you're going to approach it.
So let's look at today. Let's look at the rest of the year. Andy, which SEO playbooks are working right now, and what do you think will still be working by the end of the year?
So which ones are working right now? So definitely areas to focus on if you're building your strategy. Relevance is a key one. I always come back to relevance. So many campaigns I see ignore it. They go after, that's the biggest keyword, so I'm going to go after it. So I'm going to go after that and get caught chasing vanity keywords that aren't really going to help their business, but it's just got high search volume. So make sure what you're going after is actually going to add value to your business. It's going to bring customers that are going to be interested, they're going to sell, and it's relevant to what you're offering. Just because it's tangentially related to what you're offering and has a huge search volume, don't waste your time on it, because it is going to take so much effort to rank for it. Even if you do, it's not going to bring you decent customers anyway, because it's tangentially related. So quality over quantity, definitely, with traffic. Another big area is user experience and accessibility through your website. So we've seen lots of changes quite recently in the EU and California in particular, bringing in laws over accessibility. We've seen Google change their processes on data protection and sharing customer data through their analytics platforms and things like that, and managing cookies through websites. So making sure you're on the front foot with that. Your website needs to be accessible, not just to bots, to people and differently abled people. I can only see that getting a bigger factor in websites, making sure making sure your website is that easily accessible. It's not, only works for people in perfect health with 20/20 vision and that kind of thing. You need to make sure it's accessible. E-A-T, I know we've touched on it, mentioned most times I'm on this podcast, but it's such a big one. I only see it getting stronger. You've got to get your head above the crowd, and the way you do that is demonstrating that you are an expert in what you are talking about, and customers can trust you. I saw a great example of a little change to E-A-T, or at least a little change to the website, and a big change to E-A-T, which had a huge impact on the website towards the end of last year. And the website is an e-commerce website, so obviously you don't want lots of content on your e-commerce website because customers are there to purchase things. You need some, but obviously nobody wants to wade through 3 paragraphs of text to find the products that they want to look at. So you're a bit limited there. But this website, they updated their About Us page. The only change they made on the website, they updated their About Us page, and they mentioned about their history, and they had quite a strong local history. They created some local events that have become quite popular. They'd had a couple of locations that they'd grown, they'd moved around in the local area. Only place they mentioned that on their About Us page, suddenly all their product pages start ranking for local search terms. So this big uptick in traffic and suddenly picking up all these specific local search terms on pages that aren't talking about location because they made an update on their About Us page. But it's a good avenue for e-commerces to provide that, to gives them the opportunity to provide some information, some history about why they are special, why you should trust them, why they are experts in their industry. Same company, they had another impact in terms of they were talking about specific product types that they work with. Only area where they talked about it didn't even have filters on their website for their products to filter for these product types. They're suddenly picking up loads of rankings for keywords related to those specific product types because they're talking about it on their About Us page, saying we deal with these products and we're experts in it, and this is why you should trust us. Or the About Us page isn't the page that a customer would want; they want the product pages. Google made that connection, worked it out, started ranking their product pages for those terms.
Absolutely fascinating. It's like having been in SEO a fair while at this point, just how sometimes the littlest little trick, not necessarily a trick, but like the littlest little thing can make a big difference when it comes to SEO. I want to touch a little bit on some of the kind of the detail of what you discussed. And Charlie, when it comes to E-A-T, where you are establishing your expertise, you've got a really strong background when it comes to telling the world through digital PR and content marketing why you should be trusted. And I wonder what kind of content you've seen just historically tends to do that well.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think all content that you can put out that's actually well structured and interesting and targets your keywords, gives contextual information, is useful. But I think the biggest things are if you're really able to answer the questions that customers are going to have that are related to your product or your service, and do it in a really nice format. The types of content that I tend to see doing really well last year and generally over the years, I would say, is long form content that actually has something a little bit unique in it, where you've not just produced or spun out something that sounds really similar or could be published by one of your competitors, could be published by anyone. You've actually got something in there. And this leads into E-A-T again, but that might be expert thought. It might be from someone specific in your business who knows a lot of things about that. So for example, if I ever write anything about SEO now, I actually have Andy Tuxford review what I'm writing, because his expertise is so high in it that it makes sense to have him actually input into the writing that I'm doing as well, because it's his everyday. And everyone probably has people like that in their businesses who are absolute specialists in those areas. So get them in, get a quote from them. And then the other thing that I think makes a really big difference to long form content pieces is having like unique data points or like tasty little tidbits that you can put in that actually are interesting for users as well. And then I think more and more we're seeing, podcasts embedded, videos embedded, audio features, really nice graphics that illustrate what's being said, staying away from stock images as much as possible, which I know can be really hard, particularly for sort of corporate B2B level businesses, but is really important. If you can do it, then even better. But I would say those are probably the big things, other than, of course, if you have got product pages, service pages, making sure the content on there is so clear, so well structured, and answers everything it needs to answer without creating, as Andy mentioned earlier, like a massive essay that no one wants to read when they're actually just trying to find out what they need to know about the thing that they're in that buyer journey to get to.
Andy, when you were talking about the playbooks that kind of work, and what Charlie was saying there in terms of bringing in the right kind of information and making sure that the framing and the format all works, how do you do that in a kind of SEO point of view? How do you figure out what structure to put together, what to include, what to exclude? And also, before we move on to our next question after this one, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about this podcasting thing, because I know you've been doing some experimenting with that as well.
Okay, so how to work out what to put in your content, what's in there. So there's a couple of ways you can go about doing it. First of all, hopefully you're experts in your industry and your niche, so you should know what's valuable, what's going to be valuable for your customers, what's going to be useful for them. So hopefully you would have some idea from that. But there are a couple of other ways you can. One way, look at what ranks in Google. If you want to rank for keywords, go and look at what ranks there. There's a reason Google's prioritizing that content over others. And yes, there's lots of factors like links and so on, but just look at their content and see, are they covering it? Are you at least covering all the key points that they're covering? If not, perhaps you need to consider, do you need to add those in? Another way of doing it is a great mining technique that I've used in the past, is look at the people also asked in Google. So it's a reasonably common SEO tactic, and in my opinion, it goes about it slightly the wrong way, of looking at that and then adding those as FAQs onto pages. So it's reasonably common. You'll see lots of sites do that. I'm not a big fan of adding them as FAQs. You need to look at them and evaluate what it actually asks and say, is my content answering that? Google is literally giving you that information there. It's telling you somebody that is searching for that key term is also going to be interested in this information. So you need to answer that as well. Obviously, depending on exactly what it is, some of them you might think, oh, okay, that's not quite applicable there, and filter them out, and obviously use your judgment there. But it can give you a really good understanding of, okay, Google thinks customers that want this search also going to be interested in this, so I need to provide this as well. Not just necessarily in FAQs. I'm not a huge fan of those. They're usually dumped at the bottom of a page and not particularly. Make sure it's in your content and it's contextualized properly and adds that value. It might be a case of you might not want it in their content. You might want to create a separate piece of content and link the two together to answer those questions, depending on exactly what they are and how much depth you feel you need to go into it. But it's a great prospecting method of just finding out, okay, it gives you some insights into what Google thinks is important for people that are also looking for that core term, what information they're also going to be interested in.
I'm gonna.
So your second question.
Yeah, the podcast.
So the podcast is our process where we've been changing formats of content. Yes, also. So something we've been trialing recently with some of our larger clients is using AI tools you get some quite good ones now to convert certain blog posts into podcasts, and the AI tool creates the podcast for you. Users discussing the content, and they're getting pretty clever in terms of how they do it. You wouldn't necessarily know that that's an AI creating it. But it's a great opportunity. And going back to what I was talking about accessibility, it gives you another format that users can access your content through. Not every user wants to read a big blog post. They might want to listen to a podcast. This gives them that opportunity. It's relatively straightforward for us to do. You need to be a bit conscious about the type of content you choose to do. Not all content's going to lend itself to a podcast format. But you can use that, and that gives you another format that your users can access your content through. So as well as giving you that accessibility, Google can also see that and recognize that and say, hey, actually, this content is great because if someone wants to read it, it's covered. If somebody wants to listen to it, it's covered. So it's giving more options to the user, which is benefits to the user. And Google, as we know, Google loves content that prioritizes users.
Absolutely. Chad, I think the other day we were talking on a prior podcast about these about podcasts or these audio clips and stuff. And you're a bit of a fan as well, aren't you?
I am, in the right context. I actually much prefer reading compared to both listening to podcasts and watching videos. It's just my brain. That's what I like. But I do think there are certain types of content where actually having embedded audio is great. So for me, that's things like the Harvard Business Review, where I'm not actually just going to spend my time, Harvard Business Review, sitting listening to the Harvard Business Review, but I would do that whilst I'm doing something else. So I'd be multitasking and I'd want to listen to that article. I don't actually need to sit down and read the whole thing. And I think in the right place, I think for news sites as well, it could be awesome to have something like that more frequently. For the right kinds of content, I think it's a great idea. But I also think more and more people do like listening to things rather than having to read everything. So why not offer both if you can?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in our geo strategy podcast, which I'll link in the show notes as well, was talking about the different ways that people are going to be interacting with the internet in general. It's going to be text-based search, it's going to be voice-based search, it's going to be, various other things. People are going to want that voice stuff. They're using advanced voice chat, whatever it's called in ChatGPT, to have the kind of conversations that they would like to have with the Harvard Business Review journalist who wrote the piece. They're like, yeah, that's great, it's really interesting, but I want to talk about it. Let's have a discussion about it. It's changing a lot. I'm conscious of time.
Exactly what I do.
Conscious of time, and I want to make sure that we do cover the last few questions. The first one is, how does SEO work in an omni-channel strategy, Andy?
Okay, yeah. So there's lots of different ways that SEO works together with other channels. One of the main ones is it might not always be the case in your specific setup, but SEO tends to become the sort of the data point. They have all the data of how the website's performing, what's happening on it, things. You might have a separate business intelligence department or analytics department that is, but generally it supports SEO. Share that. You've got to share that data with other departments because there's so much interesting insights. Certain pages performing better with certain markets. You might want to group pages for remarketing because especially if you've got your tracking set up properly, you might have something, logged in customers gravitate towards this content over new customers. So let's actually remarket this content rather than everything, because that's where we're going to get the value from. Things like that. So sharing that data is really, really important. We touched on earlier in terms of how they can work with each other using other channels like ads and so on. I'm 100% a believer that Google gives sites that are running ads a little bit of a boost, not massive, but I'm a big believer that they kind of, they say they don't, and there's possibly laws in place that they shouldn't. I don't know, but I'm a big believer that actually they do tend to prefer sites that run ads. Maybe it's just a case of who's spending money, but they do seem to do better. But you've got the other way. SEO can directly support PPC, and the better optimized your pages are, your content are, the less you pay for your clicks. So better optimizing your pages for SEO reduces your click spend on PPC, which means you get more clicks for your budget. But yeah, the main one is sharing data. It's also, we sort of touched on it earlier as well, and it varies by business type, but most businesses now will have multiple touch points before they convert a customer, particularly as you get bigger and bigger value purchases. There's more and more touch points. They're not all going to come through Google Organic. They just won't. So some of them will come through other channels. And as we mentioned earlier, it's about identifying what those other channels are, where are your potential customers when they're not on your site, so you can engage them through those channels as well.
I personally really love the idea of taking the data from, let's say, there's a client of ours. If we can pull out like what's being engaged with really well on TikTok is about this particular product category, and you go, right, there's clearly interest there. Let's run the numbers and see if we have the pages for it, if we have the relevant, let's just have a look and see when people search for that product afterwards, is our page ranking top? Is there some supplementary content that needs to be created that educates people about how to use that product in conjunction with something else, like all the different related questions that can happen. You can build a little content cluster around that and feed that back into the system, all based on what's happening with your social team over here. And then the brand team get involved and think, okay, well, we can push this thing we're trying to communicate and push this other thing. Like, we've got this upcoming like product to launch as well. Like, please bring that in too. But like cross-referencing all this information can really increase the return on all of the different spend that's happening across the budget. You know, as you said before, if the remarketing is done in a way that incorporates that information, you can get a higher ROAS, because if, let's say, it's on Performance Max and you've done the keyword research and fed in that information, Performance Max will have a better understanding of what that page is about, and then will generate better ad creative, and which will then give you better results. So yeah, I do love that approach. I do want to take us on to the last bit, if I may. Last question, and then if we've got time, I'll try and pick out some questions from the chat, which is how to create a unbeatable SEO strategy. So quite a hefty one, Andy. Over to you.
Well, first of all, how to create an unbeatable SEO strategy. Engage Exposure Ninja. Shameless plug.
There's no shame. We do incredible things for our clients. I'm incredibly proud of what we do.
Very, very good results. So first thing we mentioned earlier, relevance. Go back to your plan and go through it and make sure everything you're targeting, everything you're going after is relevant. You're not just going after it because there's a big number next to it or it's sort of related to what you do. Make sure, trim the fat, basically. Make sure you've got a key area of focus on. So especially because most businesses, they're not going to have the budget to do everything at once. All the resource or whatever it is, they're not going to be able to do everything at once. So make sure you trim that. Identify what's important to your business, what's the most relevant, most meaningful area for your business. Focus on that to start with. It's a bit like a mushroom cloud tactic. Pick something, a focus area, push that, and once that's as high as it can go, then start going wider. So don't start wide, because you're just going to waste a lot of time doing a lot of things that aren't really helping. Don't neglect the basics. It's very easy to overlook the basics. You know, is your website fast? Is the technical health decent? You know, does it load cleanly? Is everything jumping around on the page when it loads, or does it load well? Don't neglect those basics. It's easy enough to get very focused on, let's optimize everything for AI, but if your basics aren't right, you're dragging a millstone. Another area I'd suggest people to learn about schema. It can be very daunting and scary to start with, but it makes such a big difference, and it helps with AI as well. So learn about even just the basics of schema. So Google's got some help resources in their developers section of their website talking about schema, and I think they've got a list of about 20 something key types. Most websites, only 2 or 3 of them are going to be applicable to. So it's worth learning about those, just because they make a big difference in how bots can understand your website. And the big one mentioned earlier, make sure you're using your data. Make sure your tracking is accurate, not just the basic tracking set up from analytics, which is, does the job, but you can do so much more with it. Make sure you are determine what information from your website would be valuable to your business, allow you to make valuable decisions, and then get your tracking set up to capture that. So we sort of touched on it earlier. There's a business we worked with where we set up some advanced tracking for them. It was quite simple in the end. Essentially, we separated users based on if they logged into the site or not. So we could separate, this person has an account, this person doesn't. We could separate them and then see, okay, how do they behave differently on the website? And what I was mentioning earlier, this is where the thought came from. It allowed them to identify actually users that log in and have an account generally interact with different content than users that don't. So that allows us to go, okay, well, that content's more valuable to users that have already interacted with us. So let's focus our remarketing campaigns on that content, and let's try and push our acquisition campaigns towards this other content. And that allowed them to, it was only a short-term project with them, so we didn't get a huge amount of data, but the early signs were very promising in terms of it would just made their marketing efforts so much more efficient being able to do that. So identify what is going to be valuable, what information you need from your website. Forget about what you can get, start with like blank slate and think about what will be valuable, and then work out how to get it through your tagging, because 99% say times you're going to be able to get it with Google Analytics. So yeah, those are the areas I'd start with. As we mentioned before, don't want to sound like a broken record, but E-A-T, reviewing your content, making sure you're not just writing for bots, you are writing content that actually is going to be valuable for your users and shows why you're an expert. Why should they trust you? Everybody interacting your website, you've got to assume is interacting blind. They don't know you. You need to prove to them why they should trust you.
Charlie, I'm going to come to you on this one because it's related to content, and also, again, coming back to the marketing leader's point of view of like piecing it all together. With your background and how you have, quite extensive E-A-T yourself when it comes to content and marketing, how do you tie this all together in a tactical way of creating SEO-infused content, or perhaps a strategy that pulls it all together?
Oh, this is a great question. And it's one of the reasons, like as an agency, we do our SEO and content strategies together, because they complement each other and work together so effectively. I always like to think of it as a bit of a pyramid, where at the bottom, you've got all of your tracking, your technical stuff, your schema, site health, all of that, and making sure that that works really well. And then the next bit that you focus on once all of your foundations are there is your on-site. And actually using your keyword research, which is so important to get right and to actually think about, because it's the foundation of everything that you're doing on site and then later off site as well. Using your keyword research to actually plan and structure what your website's going to look like before you just start throwing loads of blogs and loads of pages up there. And if you do have loads of blogs and loads of pages up there, you don't need to panic. The whole reason to create this structure is then so you can sort them out, so that it looks like a really beautiful, I was going to say spider, but it could be a tree or something lovely that makes lots of sense, that when you're a user navigating around a website, you can find the content that you really want. And then when you've got those keywords, you've got the core ones, you've got clusters going around it of supporting content, you can write really amazing things because you've already got all of that technical structure in place. And then, within that, SEO is of course taking care of all of the page titles, the meta descriptions, the alt tags on the images, everything else that's going on in that page as well. So you've got those two working together. When you've got that and that's going well and you're starting to build traction there, which is incredibly important, then you can start your offsite bit. And I think this is where the PR and the content side comes in more and more, and all of these backlinks that you gain through doing PR and all of the additional content mentions that you're going to get through that kind of campaign feeds back into everything that you've been working on already. It feeds back into your website's ranking and SEO. And if you already, if the website's already great, it's going to improve those rankings. If you've got all the technical stuff, if you've already got really good on-site, then you've got the keywords, the clusters in place to already know what you want to build links around, to already know the areas that you actually want to push, that you want to talk about, that you want to be known for as a business. And then all of that nicely comes together to start actually supporting GEO and ranking in AI chatbots as well. So it's almost a bit of a double whammy. But I like to see it, like a little bit of a pyramid.
I love that. I wonder as well, coming back to the E-A-T stuff of like brand and originality, if you've seen any work recently that really showcases how you can do that well as part of like an SEO strategy, part of a GEO strategy, perhaps this generative engine optimization.
What's going on, Charlie?
Go.
I've lost my train of thought now. So it will look different for every business, because it's going to look different for every niche and every business in terms of how you do that. So the trick with E-A-T is being promotional without being too promotional. So obviously you're selling yourself. You're trying to prove why you're an expert, why you should be trusted, which is quite promotional. But Google tends to not be too keen on being overly promotional. Say, "Oh, we're the best, we're the greatest." Google's like, "Yeah, great, who cares?" Or, we've got 80 years experience in our team. Okay, yeah, that's a reason why I might trust you, or why you'd be experts on it. So you've got to kind of be promotional without overdoing it. But yeah, it's going to be very different for every niche. So a way that I prefer approaching it is through the keyword research, as Charlie was sort of touching on a moment ago. But grouping your keywords, so you'd have your primary keyword, which is like your service keyword. That's what's going to drive your sales. But then your E-A-T keywords would be, you group them. There'd be your keywords that sit sort of under that. So you'd identify the ones, what are valuable, what's still valuable and connected to that, but maybe not quite right for the sales page, and then use that to build your EA content under that. So to pull an example off, the way you'd want to approach it, let's say we're promoting Exposure Ninja. So you might have SEO agency as your primary keyword that you want to rank for, but then behind that, you're going to need content like, you're going to find lots of keywords that have high value, like SEO strategy, benefits of SEO, how to do SEO for B2B, all things like that. They're not keywords that you want your money pages to rank for, but you need what you want to be ranking for, and they also help demonstrate your EAT. You can show how to produce an SEO strategy well. That's a reason why you're an expert on as an SEO agency. So that then feeds into there. It's I like Charlie's pyramid idea, or to kind of tack onto it a little bit. You've got your core keyword at the top. That's your money keyword. That's the big one that you want. That's at the top. And then going down a bit, you've got, and you'll usually see probably search volumes will probably drop a little bit as you go down because they're getting a bit longer tail keywords and so on. But you'll then have your bit more, there might be more akin to explain, it'd be a topic cluster like SEO strategy. So that's probably going to rank very well. And then you need to work down from that and expand that one out as well. And okay, what elements of SEO strategy are people interested in? What elements what do they need information on, and creating that. And how that exactly looks is going to be different. Maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a blog post, maybe it's a downloadable guide, depending on exactly what it is you're going for. But structure it like that. Start with your money keyword. That's your one for your big page. Look for your topic keywords related to that. Then define from your topic keywords, define the actual content pieces, and then work out how those content pieces need to look.
The marketing challenge I see and I kind of enjoy is how you go for those money keywords, or the different broader versions of them, and establish the EAT through the title itself. So for example, you can write a title for a blog or a YouTube video, whatever it is, that is how to create a strategy for 2025. But then how do you get that in front of the right audience? And in our example, we'd love to talk to marketing leaders. You got to change the title very slightly to make it super relevant to them, whilst also still being relevant to a broader search audience. Like, how do you do that? So in our case, it might be everything that marketing directors need to know about creating an SEO strategy for 2025. You've got to marry the two. You've got to marry your marketing and brand stuff and establish your EAT. Like you said before, there's a prior example of an accountant's point of view on the tax changes for 2025. Establish this person knows this field exceptionally well. You could go to any website to read about the tax changes for 2025, if there are any. I don't know. But if you say a medium-sized business accountant's guide to the tax changes 2025, establishes your EAT before you even before that person's actually clicked on it. Charlie, you had a point that I also want to hear as well, so I'm going to come back to you now.
Oh, I had a specific brand example of a brand that I've been absolutely loving, how they're dominating in search, but they're also dominating on social, and they're using LinkedIn to do it. And that's Monzo, as in Monzo the bank, which is a big example. But they've spent a lot of time on their LinkedIn, and they've got a very sort of cheeky personality where, it's almost as if they've I'm sure it's a very talented person doing this LinkedIn, but it's almost as if they've tried to get a cheeky intern to write their LinkedIn. Like that's the persona they've gone for. And they'll do posts that are things that are more elusive than the January payday, the printer working on the first go in the office, that kind of thing that's like a bit funny and a bit tongue in cheek. And they do the same sort of thing with their brand on the website. Like the current hero image on the website is like a guy in a bath, like. And one of their, like they've got campaigns out at the moment around how you actually make money work for everyone, because a lot of what Monzo's branding is about is how we use all of this data so that you can actually like enjoy your banking. It's not like, oh, this horrible old banking app that I have to get my card reader. It takes me an hour to blooming log in just to see like all of my money. Like Monzo's actually making it, interactive and engaging. And I like they're putting PR campaigns out specifically about that, to be like, money doesn't have to be boring. It can be fun. And they're getting those articles published, across the internet, all sorts of different places. So, I mean, obviously they're a big brand, so they have a bit more sort of onus to be able to get in places like the Telegraph, but they're also doing it in things like Marketing Week and actually showing off the campaigns they're running, getting their LinkedIn ranking with these like quirky little things that they're putting out there, and doing a great omni-channel campaign. So I think they're one of the brands that's a really fun one to look at. Also, who thought banking could ever be fun? They've done it.
Yeah, absolutely. It just reminded me, I was looking at a white paper just earlier, which was a white paper example for B2B for me to learn from. And it was talking about, the example was what traditional banks could learn from digital banking or from digital banking apps and stuff like that. And it was great because I loved it as a white paper is an effective way of promoting your brand, depending on what the business is. If you're like, whatever it is, I can't remember the company that it was for, which is not a good branding lesson from that white paper. But they were basically trying to say, you can do this kind of thing. Then you just build off the back of that. You make it the center of the hub or the bottom of the pyramid or whatever it is, and say like, this is the white paper. This is our stance on this issue. If you want to talk about it, here's our number, call us, or you can go to this related piece of content on the blog. You can go to this related podcast series where we broke it down. It's only 6 episodes long, this series, but you'll hear everything you need to know about the transition from traditional to digital, or go to this video series or here's a webinar. You just tie all that stuff, which then pays off by pointing back to your website for the SEO purposes of educating the algorithm, which is a lot AI based nowadays compared to where it used to be pretty much only backlink and on page based, and to other LLMs as well. They're also going to learn from all of that content that ties into that original thought piece, that original white paper.
I love that. Just make your content juicy.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we are really coming up to time. This has gone longer than I had intended, but there's so much for you to expertise, authority for you to share that I can't say no. There are a couple of questions that I do want to cover before we head off. The first one up here was about different platforms. So Marcus was asking if there are other promising platforms that could help to drive traffic. So I'd like to think of this in like an SEO kind of way. So perhaps coming back to the original question of, do we go to Reddit and Quora for an SEO and traffic purpose, or are there other platforms that we should be looking at?
I'm struggling to think of one that wouldn't be niche or specific to niches or a business type or a location or any of those things. In general, as a general overview, as we kind of said at the beginning, Google's so dominant. It's hard to see other ones that aren't specific. AI does seem to be making moves, but it is, again, there's a bit split between ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, etc. All these other platforms. I expect one of them is probably going to emerge the more dominant one in time. Which one exactly? It's hard to say. But yeah, general platforms that you look at is different social media platforms. Exactly which one is going to depend on your business, but different social media platforms. So we know how popular social media is, whether it's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. It's hugely popular. So some of them, but you're going to have differing returns depending on your niche. Yeah, things like Quora, Reddit seems to do quite well recently since Google used it to training their AI. That seems to have had some benefits there.
Yeah, I see Reddit all the time now. And Reddit, I'm not usually a Reddit user. I know that you are more so than me, Dale. But now I find that Reddit comes up in the Google search results so often when I'm doing research about a product or service that I find myself using it because it's almost always in the top 5. And then I think, well, I may as well have some people's specific opinions. I was just researching like the difference between the Google Pixel 8 and the 8A, which in terms of naming convention isn't very different, I don't think. And I basically went to Reddit to find out. I read Tech Radar and then I read Reddit. And previously I would never have done that. So I think we're seeing Reddit way more. I'm also seeing LinkedIn a lot more for anything sort of business related and marketing knowledge related, but not so much for anything with commercial intent in terms of coming up in the Google search.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just today, I saw an example of somebody who took a piece of content from a deranked website. I've been like, I can't remember, manual action or helpful content update, just got tanked. They took the piece of content off of there. They put it as a LinkedIn article, like a LinkedIn post thing, and it's now ranking in the AI overview for the same thing that it got removed from the search results for. It's absolutely wild.
Sorry, just to quickly add on to another thought that's occurred to me. Isn't a bit more niche specific, but if your primary customer base is more elderly, take a look at Bing. Bing normally is quite small. Most business, not a huge amount of search, but it does tend to weight towards more elderly people. So if your business offering is more targeted towards elderly people, it's worth considering Bing as well. Obviously, there's the other search engines for various locations like Baidu if you're in China and so on. But I'm assuming most of the people listening to this won't be, so it'll be Google's going to be dominant, but Bing does tend to weight more towards more elderly people.
Well, not only that, it also weights towards people who are in offices. Like people are forced to use Microsoft products. They're on Teams. They're in. It's not called Office anymore. It's called something else. Copilot 365. I don't know. They're forced to use Bing just straight out of the box. So a lot of like B2B queries tend to happen in Bing, which is why Microsoft ads can be quite a winner for some kinds of industries and some types of business. Another question. So what about local SEO, Andy? Is it changing? Is it the same? How do we go about it today?
So, local SEO. So that's a whole podcast on its own. Okay, business not focused on specific regions. So the big thing with local SEO, you need to determine if the search terms that you're going after are going to drive value for your business if Google determines they have local intent. So Google basically decides all search terms, whether it's got local intent or not. And that's based on whatever rank brains we're working out to decide. But it's reasonably straightforward. You can work it out yourself in terms of if you were doing that search term, would you want a local business or not? Like a simple example would be if you're looking for a hairdressers. If you're in Nottingham, a hairdresser in Glasgow isn't going to be helpful to you. So it's going to have local intent, and they've got varying levels of local intent depending on the business type to how far they deem people would reasonably go. So if you do, for example, stick with hairdresser, you're going to probably get very hyper local results very close to you. If you're looking for restaurants, example, it's probably going to go a bit wider. If you're looking for plumbers, it's going to go wider still, because they know for those types of businesses, you or their business is going to be prepared to travel more. So you need to use that to determine how local you're targeting. But yeah, whether you need local or not, you need to determine is the local intent versus for the searches that you want to rank for. If there is, you need local SEO. Then that moves into determining, okay, how local do you need to go? How granular do you need to go based on exactly what the offering is?
Next question up. Well, there's actually two questions that probably tie into each other. So do you have a feel for YouTube's growth in the Google search results, or any stats on this? And the same kind of question again is, I'd love to know more about the use of videos in SEO. Is it better to create a video instead of a written blog?
Okay. Stats for YouTube's growth. I don't have any stats, unfortunately. Definitely in terms of anecdotal, they appeal more.
I've got a stat. It's not exactly about YouTube's growth, even though YouTube is growing, but video carousels in the SERPs I read in 2024, they grew about 75% year on year, which is pretty significant. Don't know what that looks like now, obviously, that we're in 2025, but that says to me we're probably seeing video carousels more than before. I personally am seeing them on my searches a lot more on sort of how-to videos. So I'm a climber, so I spend a lot of my time thinking about how I could get better at climbing, Googling such things, which then leads into things like, how do I improve my finger strength? What kind of climbing shoes do I need? Etc., etc. And I see a lot of videos, those kinds of searches. So I think we are seeing it more for that kind of thing, but not necessarily always the like on the nose product and service. I don't see it hardly ever. That's my little stat. Back to you, Andy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Second part of that question, or second question, video or blog? Why not both?
Fair point.
If you can do both, do both. If you can't, if you have to choose one, which one's going to be best for your audience? One's going to have an edge over the other in terms of your primary audience. Which one's going to be easier for them based on who they are and the type of information you're trying to communicate? Is that going to be better consumed through a video or through a written blog? Go with whichever one it is.
Like if you know the title you're making, like give the keywords a Google and see what the search results look like. If there's a massive video carousel at the top, then maybe you want to do video. But if you're not seeing any videos at all and that's not coming up in the search results, go blog. But I would say also, why not both?
Yeah, and you'd be surprised, like just how basic a YouTube video can be that can still perform well. Like you can really just be you and a very simple camera setup or sharing the screen. If it answers the correct question correctly, people will enjoy it and they'll get the engagement it needs for it to be inserted into the SERPs. And just on that point of percentage of like, how much they're appearing, I just did a quick look on a website called Rank Ranger, which tracks like the different SERP features. You're actually more likely to see a video thumbnail in the search results right now than you are an AI overview. They're in 12% of searches that this is tracking versus 3% for AI overviews, which is fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Cool. We are really coming up for time. I don't have real time for the last two questions, but if you do have any questions and you're watching this over on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment down below and we'll be able to answer them afterwards. And if you are listening to us via our podcast streams on iTunes, or is it called iTunes anymore? It's like Apple Podcasts. There we go. A bad habit, old habit. Or on Spotify, you can leave questions on there as well, and we'll get back to you. If you are enjoying this series about strategizing for 2025, please join us next week where we'll be joined by Tim Cameron Kitchen, Expression Ninja's founder, where we'll be talking about how to do a wider digital marketing strategy for 2025. Thanks so much for joining us, and see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.